Hey everyone, grab a mug of something hot, dim the lights just a notch, and settle in while the algorithm unspools another midnight history yarn. Before we crack open the Plague Doctor's kit, yes, that creepy beak mask and all, do me a solid. Hit the like button if you're secretly into the weird corners of the past. Tap subscribe so this little channel keeps floating above the algorithmic swamp, and drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. Watching the dots pop up from Melbourne to Reykjavik makes these sleepless research nights feel a lot less lonely. All set? Great. Let's time travel to a place that smells faintly of incense, vinegar, and raw terror. First, picture a narrow medieval street somewhere in Europe. Florence, Paris, London, pick your poison. The cobbles are wet because the town watch ordered residents to sluice their thresholds with lye water at dawn. Theoretically, filth caused plague. In practice, it just gave the rats a refreshing drinking fountain. The bells in the cathedral tower sound distant, muffled by thick, humid air. You tug the collar of your wool tunic, and it sticks to the sweat crawling down your spine. Summer is not kind to plague towns. Heat quickens decay, and decay quickens fear. Now listen. Far down the lane, a slow clop-clop rises. Horse hooves, but not the proud jingle of a knight's destrier. This gate is tired, resigned. Around the corner lurches a skinny mare, ribs counting themselves under hide. On its back, a hunched figure in black robes, wide-brimmed hat drooping like a wilted mushroom, leather gloves shiny with oils. And then that mask emerges into view, long, curved beak stuffed with herbs, two red glass eye holes gleaming like demon embers. Children freeze mid-play. A shopkeeper yanks his shutter closed. A widow, making her meager market rounds, presses her crucifix to chapped lips. The arrival of a plague doctor announces two grim facts simultaneously. Someone is already dead, and more are likely to follow. Congratulations, friend! You have volunteered to be that doctor for a single day. Spoiler, you will not enjoy the shift, and odds are high you will not survive it. But hey, the medical guild insisted they were professionals, so let's give you the standardized kit. Item 1. The costume. You thought the beak mask was just theatrical? Nah, it was designed in the 1600s by Charles Delorme, physician to Louis XIII of France, and quickly adopted across Europe. The theory of miasma, bad air exhaled by the sick, thick with invisible plague particles, dominated. The beak functioned like a medieval N95, stuffed with rosemary, mint, camphor, crushed cloves, maybe a citrus peel if you felt fancy. You inhaled through that herbal filter, hoping the fragrant cloud would neutralize contagion. In reality, it mostly kept the worst corpse stench from triggering your gag reflex, but we'll pretend morale counts as medicine. Item 2. A long staff, usually 5 to 6 feet of ash wood. Its uses were myriad. Pry open a patient's mouth to examine buboes without kissing distance. Push bystanders away. Lift bed sheets. Threaten dogs gnawing on uncollected bodies. And, less spoken of, poke corpses to confirm they were truly still and not merely in plague-induced stupor. Call it multitasking 101. Item 3. Diagnostic Manual. Maybe you own a tattered copy of Girolamo Fracastoro's treatise on contagion or Guy de Chauliac's Chirurgia Magna. They prescribe bloodletting, chicken feather scarification, and lancing buboes with a sharpened goose quill. Most doctors can barely read the Latin footnotes, but you keep it tucked inside your robe to look credible. Item 4. Leather satchel of treatments. Dried toad, viper flesh powder, mercury ointment. Enjoy the slow poisoning. A lodestone to draw out evil humors. And jars of theriac, a spicy remedy originally containing opium, cinnamon, and an entire ground-up viper. Apothecaries swear by it, though most patients just pass out from the narcotics, which, given circumstances, might be the kindest outcome. Finally, attitude. You must project calm because panic kills faster than fever, or so city councils hope. Good luck with that once you smell the next patient. Speaking of which, your first call arrives via a frantic knock on the guild hall door. A baker's apprentice limps in, eyes wild. His master collapsed near the ovens, dark swelling in the groin, blackened fingers, breath rattling like a broken bellows. You heft your bag, pull on that suffocating mask, and stride into sunlight. People flatten against walls as you pass. No greeting, no tips of the hat, just dread. Inside the bakery, the heat is fierce, sour with spoiled yeast. The master lies on flour dust floorboards, skin plaid with sweat streaks and white patches. The groin bubo bulges under thin linen like a purple plum ready to burst. Here is where theory meets gore. You kneel, and every sense rebels. Your leather gloves grow slick. The odor of rot muscles past rose petals in your beak. Remember, anesthesia is a century and change away. Your patient is wide awake, whimpering prayers. You reach for a lancet, essentially a miniature dagger, heated in the oven moments earlier. Textbooks say red-hot metal cauterizes vessels as it cuts, reducing bleeding. They do not mention the scream. As steel pierces tender abscess, pus fountains across your glove, yellow, blood-streaked, clumping with flour dust. For a second you fear the jet might spatter your eye lenses. You twist away just in time. The baker thrashes. 2 apprentices hold him, weeping. You whisper a psalm. Doctor, priest, executioner share certain verses, and hope the release of fluid will ease pain. It rarely does. Next, you prescribe a poultice. Warm onion, butter, garlic mash smeared over the wound and wrapped in cabbage leaves. Does it help? Doubtful, but at least it smells less lethal than the patient. Payment? The city council subsidizes plague doctors with a quarterly salary, so you take no coin. That's the theory. In truth, the council often defaults when coffers run dry. Many doctors accept bread, wine, or, ironically, the dead man's boots. You decline. The leather may harbor fleas. Outside again, you mark the bakery door with a red cross using chalk. Some towns nail up the infected house. Others relocate the family to pest houses outside the walls, flimsy sheds where the plague burns through bodies like wildfire. In Venice, they send victims to Lazaretto Vecchio on boats. In Marseille, to the islet of If. Here, authorities just hope citizens are too scared to visit that shop again. Mid-morning. Sun climbs, stench builds. You march toward the riverside slum. Rats cascade along gutter edges, bold, sated. You step over one, glimpse bloated black bellies, patchy fur trembling with fleas. Inside your beak, heart knocks ribs. Miasma theory says air transmits disease, not vermin, yet you cannot ignore the pattern. Where rats flourish, coffins multiply. You vow to petition the council for a bounty on rodents, if you survive long enough.
Next patient, a priest in a tiny chapel. He lies under faded tapestries depicting paradise, green hills, bright rivers, saints in singing posture. The contrast is brutal. His lips are purple, pulse faint. He confesses he gave last rites to 30 victims yesterday. He also slept no more than an hour. You brew him a tonic of wine, honey, and wormwood. He coughs half down, vomits it up. You suggest bleeding to balance humors. He nods weakly. You open a vein in his forearm, catching thick, dark blood in a tin bowl. 10 ounces, enough, you hope, to please Galen's ghost. You quote Augustine about suffering bringing souls closer to God. Yet part of you wonders if the Almighty outsourced plague control to man because he'd grown tired of humanity's noise. You banish that heresy behind the mask, but it sits in the beak like another herb. You coughs half down, vomits it up. You suggest bleeding to balance humors. He nods weakly. You open a vein in his forearm, catching thick, dark blood in a tin bowl. 10 ounces, enough, you hope, to please Galen's ghost. You quote Augustine about suffering bringing souls closer to God. Yet part of you wonders if the Almighty outsourced plague control to man because he'd grown tired of humanity's noise. You banish that heresy behind the mask, but it sits in the beak like another herb.
Outside the chapel, a woman grabs your sleeve, sobbing that the burial pit is full again. Gravediggers refuse to work. They're drunk or dying. As plague doctor, you're expected to inspect pits for sanitary compliance. That means wading among corpses, sprinkling quicklime over gaping mouths. You trudge uphill to the field, cloth filters clenched between teeth. The trench is grotesque origami. Limbs folded, torsos stacked, sheet-wrapped bundles labeled with names that will be lost by winter. You record approximate numbers in your ledger, 57 since yesterday. You draft a note to the mayor requesting more lime, more carts, more diggers. You know the letter will sit on a desk while bureaucracy compares cost of lime versus cost of prayers. Afternoon brings rain. Good? It suppresses dust, maybe miasma. Bad? It floods alleys where sewage floats, turning each puddle into a bacterial broth. Your mask grows soggy, herbs clinging to nostrils. You stop beneath a laundry awning, tip water from hat brim, and share a moment with a stray dog gnawing a boot sole. It stares up, wary yet curious. You wonder if dogs catch plague. Some chronicles claim yes. Modern science says fleas prefer humans after canine blood. Either way, you can't adopt him.
A bell signals curfew. Markets close, streets empty as if by spell. Only you, body collectors and thieves, remain. The latter know plague houses hold valuables ripe for the taking. But who stops to fence jewelry when lungs may pepper with buboes tomorrow? Desperation breeds boldness. A pair of youths trail you, guessing the doctor's bag hides silver lancets, expensive spices. You pivot, raise your staff. The beak's silhouette alone is enough. They scatter. Terror can be armor. You reach the municipal pest house by dusk. It was a leper hospital once. Stone walls, straw pallets, barred windows. Now the air pulses with groans. Torches smoke along corridors. Attendants in plain linen move like ghosts, faces tired beyond age. You make rounds, doling out rose vinegar to swab lips, applying pancake-thick plasters of dried fig and butter to armpit swellings. One young girl clutches a rag doll, eyes huge. She asks if you're a bird. Only at night, you joke, voice muffled. She laughs, coughs, laughs again. She won't last till dawn. You know the signs. You cannot weep. Tears fog eyepieces. After midnight, you finally remove mask and gloves in a side chamber. Your face is raw where leather rubbed. Nose bleeds from dryness. You wash with wine because water might carry plague. It stings, the kind of sting that proves you're alive. Dinner? A crust of rye dipped in garlic broth. Garlic allegedly purifies blood. Mostly it masks the taste of fear. Sleep? Not yet. The mayor's messenger bangs on the door. A nobleman across the river shows suspicious symptoms. Nobles fund your salary. Nobles expect immediate service. You force feet back into damp boots, fresh gloves, ride a borrowed mule through deserted lanes lit only by guttering lamps. The noble quarter is eerily silent, as if plague respects social rank. Spoiler, it doesn't. Inside the manor, you find tapestries drawn over doorways, servants huddled whispering prayers to Saint Rach. The master lies on silken sheets embroidered with gold thread portraying hunting scenes. Healthy men, healthy dogs, no black swellings. Reality rewrites the fabric. His neck lymph nodes bulge like goose eggs. He refuses lancing, demands you concoct a theriac draft worth more than his chandelier. You comply. Equal parts opium, cinnamon, saffron, wine. He gulps greedily, drifts into sleepy stupor. Will it cure him? Maybe, if the dose kills fleas faster than it kills him. Either way, tomorrow the manor's shutters will close to keep rumor inside. Finally, near dawn, you stumble into your rented room above the apothecary. Shoes off, robe hung, mask perched like a morbid parrot on the window ledge. You feel weightless, as if each patient siphoned a slice of your soul. You drop onto straw mattress. Ceiling beams twist into visions of black ships ferrying the dead across a starlit river. You hear the baker's scream, the priest's cough, the doll girl's laugh. Sleep arrives anyway, thick and dreamless, body's rebellion against memory. A rooster crows. 5 hours gone. Someone pounds the stairwell. Another emergency. A midwife collapsed during childbirth. Rumors of pneumonic plague, airborne, lethal within a day. Your joints ache, but duty beckons. You splash wine on your face, chew a sliver of angelica root to stead nerves, and reach for the mask. For a heartbeat, your reflection in the pewter mirror startles you. Red-rimmed eyes, pallid skin, beak looming like a vulture ready to feast on its own host. You wonder how many more dawns before your pulse stutters into the ledger you keep for others. The odds say not many.
Records show plague doctors drop like flies. Their herbal filters no match for Yersinia pestis hitchhiking on fleas. Pay is decent, but pensions are non-existent.
And still you descend the stairs, because someone must. Because in a world unraveling daily, wearing a bird mask and poking pustules with hot iron passes for hope. And because, if we're honest, you crave the strange authority this costume bestows. People listen, they obey. In a life where serfs rarely rise above mud, the plague doctor stands taller than any knight, in reputation, if not in joy.
So ends your first 24 hours. You've lanced, bled, prayed, bribed, threatened, endured. You haven't eaten properly, bathed, or smiled behind that leather muzzle. You're alive, but the flea in your collar might be shaking dice already. Most new doctors last a month, some only a week. Whether you make dawn number 2 depends on rat population, immunity you neither understand nor control, and a luck talisman you bought from a toothless crone outside town gate. She swore it was carved from unicorn bone. It's goat horn, obviously, but you keep it close anyway. You shove the attic window open just wide enough for dawn's mildew-flavored air to creep in, and before your eyelids can protest, the church bell hammers 6 slow strokes. Time to become the bird again. The beak feels heavier this morning, as though it soaked up every nightmare that prowled your straw mattress. You haul it on anyway, cinch the leather collar tight, whisper the same bargain you mouthed yesterday. One more day, Lord, and I'll draft a new litany of thank yous. He hasn't answered yet, but unanswered prayers are still prayers. So you march down the stairs into streets washed the color of old bones. No roosters now. Most were eaten when grain prices spiked. Instead, you hear a distant rattle of wagon wheels and realize the corpse cart is already making rounds. 2 hooded collectors chant Ave Maria with the sloppy rhythm of men who've smelled too much death to sing on key. They spot you, nod, and keep rolling. The tally in your ledger is about to climb again. The ink is barely dry from yesterday's entries. First call, the midwife who collapsed. Her cottage squats beside the tannery, where vats of urine-soaked hides steam like cauldrons from Hades. The smell in your beak instantly mutinies. Mint and camphor fuse with ammonia until your eyes water. Inside, the room is chaos. A mother still in blood-stained linens cradles a slick newborn. The midwife lies on the floor, lips blue, breath as fragile as spun sugar. Pneumonic plague moves fast. Airborne, no buboes, just burning lungs and pink foam. You cannot cure it, only witness it. You instruct the household to hang damp sheets doused in vinegar, a futile curtain between life and contagion. You should order them into quarantine, but you see the husband's cracked hands and know they rely on today's wages to eat tonight. So you barter with paradox. Stay together, but open windows. Keep warm, but burn no extra firewood. Pray loudly, but speak to no neighbors. They thank you through tears. You pretend the beak hides your guilt. You head next to the Guildhall, where city councilors demand a status report. They sit at a polished walnut table suspiciously free of dust, each man clutching a pomander ball of cloves and ambergris. You lay out numbers. 83 new cases, 29 deaths overnight, burial pit saturated. They murmur about budgets, weigh lime against incense, debate whether shutting the north gate might spare richer quarters. One alderman asks if you're certain rats have anything to do with it. He owns granaries lining the river. Extermination costs bite into profit. You reply in cautious Latin quotations, Celsus, Aristotle, because nothing scares a bureaucrat like scholarship. He grumbles, but the council authorizes an extra barrel of lime and half pay for 5 new gravediggers. Half pay means half-hearted work, but you signed the order. It beats digging alone. Back outside, a drizzle starts, gluing chimney soot to window glass. You head for the apothecary shop to replenish supplies. He greets you with trembling hands. He buried his apprentice last night. Shelves that once smelled of lavender now reek of musk and carrion. Too many visitors clutching sickroom sheets. You ask for marjoram, rue, and powdered myrrh. He has rue, no marjoram, and the myrrh shipment sank when the merchant galley quarantined at harbor. You compromise. Dried sage, handful of juniper berries, and a small vial of aquavitae. He tries to gift it. You insist on promissory note. If you die, the council cancels debts. He sighs, scribbles his shaky signature. This, too, is medicine, keeping the living solvent. Mid-morning, the sky bruises purple. Thunder rolls over the hills, a sound so deep it rattles roof tiles. Townsfolk bless themselves, convinced storms drive plague vapors from hiding. You know lightning kills fleas, fleas spread plague. The logic is thin, but you welcome any ally. Rain lashes as you arrive at the convent. The abbess meets you clutching a reliquary containing a splinter of the true cross, or a chip of oak. Provenance matters less than faith. 4 sisters are feverish. Nuns keep immaculate dormitories, but charity drags infection through the gates. They washed beggars' clothes, took in orphaned infants. Now they cough blood. You instruct isolation in the guest wing, circulate cassia-soaked cloths, and teach the youngest sister how to mix honey and vinegar gargles. She smiles like someone offered a sword in a dragon's den. Before you leave, the abbess presses 2 silver pennies into your gloved palm. "For alms," she whispers. You pocket them, intending to bribe the next gravedigger who balks. Next patient. The barber surgeon. Yes, even healers fall. His shop's red and white pole hangs crooked. Inside, razors soak in a basin already brown with blood. He sits slumped, left leg swollen from an abscess he tried to lance himself. You examine the site and realize the wound is not plague, but erysipelas, a flesh infection. Irony, amidst epidemic, mundane bacteria may still win. You fold your cape, kneel, and clean the gash with wine heated over a candle stub. He winces, but thanks you with professional stoicism. In return, he offers his sharpest scalpel. You accept. A fresh blade is priceless. Noon's church bells echo through empty streets. Normally, merchants hawk bread, fish, trinkets. Today, shutters stay closed, except at taverns. Fear drives thirst. You skip lunch to visit the orphanage, where children chew bark because flour ran out. Malnutrition makes them ripe for plague. You draft a requisition for oats from church granaries. You know distribution will lag behind hunger, but words are your only weapon, not tipped with steel. Mid-afternoon lightning finally cracks, startling you backward into a doorway. A hail of wet stone smell rushes by. You notice a beggar curled under that very arch. Eyes dull, pulse thread-like, a bubo on his neck so taut it gleams. Your staff can't lift him. You whistle the corpse cart collectors. They arrive, reluctant. He's not dead yet. You argue. Transport him now, spare a dozen later. They haggle over hazard pay. You pull out the abbess's pennies. Transaction sealed. They load the man, murmuring about sinful charity. You wonder which sin is his, poverty or pestilence. As rain lightens, you head toward the watchtower. The guard captain requested inspection of prisoners. The dungeon smell outcompetes your herb jar in seconds. 2 inmates lie shackled, feverish. You loosen their irons enough to examine armpits, livid, softball-sized lumps. The captain urges quick execution to prevent spread. Executions create crowds. Crowds spread faster. You instead mark the cell door with tar, station a guard, and scrawl orders for twice daily vinegar fumigation. You're painfully aware how useless that likely is, but you buy time. Science will not arrive for centuries. Until then, time is your currency. Evening approaches. You return to the pest house. Straw pallets overflow. 2 attendants drag corpses to a side room, tag toes with scraps of parchment. You help lift a young man. His chest rattles like dice in a cup, then goes still as you move him. Death mid-transfer, not uncommon. You recite a quick blessing, though you're not ordained. Rules bend around necessity. He joins the growing row against the far wall. You check pulse after pulse. 3 more slip away during rounds. A commotion erupts near the entrance. The doll girl's mother screams. Her child's breath falters. You reach her bed, see tiny ribs hitching under a crusted shift. You massage her back, whisper nonsense lullabies through the mask. She opens one eye, mumbles, "Birdman." You squeeze her hand, so small inside your glove, and feel the final chill spread. When she's gone, you stand too fast, dizziness swarming. The nurse touches your sleeve. "You've done what you can," she says. You nod, leave, and vomit behind the privy. Back at your room, you strip off robe and gloves, plunge them into a barrel of lye water. You scrape candle stubs together, journaling every case in cramped script. Chronicles matter. If no one records the horror, future physicians will repeat mistakes. You pause, realizing your own cough has grown hoarse. Dust or omen? You gargle wine, chew rue leaves, convince yourself of allergies. Night again. The city imposes firewatch curfew. No lamps after vespers to discourage thieves and gatherings. Darkness presses against window panes like damp wool. You sit on the mattress edge, clutching that goat horn charm. You think of family in the countryside. You haven't written because plague letters often meet the hearth before the reader. Safer to keep memory unsullied. A knock jars your half-sleep. Not frantic this time. A measured tap, scholarly. You open door a crack. There stands Brother Matthias, monk and amateur astronomer. He carries parchment covered in star charts and plague tallies. He believes conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter govern epidemics. Tonight, he says, the planets align in the house of Pisces, air and water, portending climax of pestilence. He seeks your data. You invite him in, share ledgers, discuss theory until candles gutter. His optimism is alien. He thinks understanding skies may unlock cures. You envy him. Before leaving, he offers a vial of distilled rosewater for eye irritation. Small kindnesses glue sanity together.
You attempt sleep, but dreams burst like infected glands. Rats morphing into children, bells tolling inside your skull, a beak mask floating above your bed whispering, "You're next." You jolt awake at pre-dawn gray, drenched. You consider quitting, riding out beyond city walls, hiding in forest hermitage. Yet you know, plague shadows travelers. Better to face it where you're needed. Duty is habit. Habit becomes identity. Before gearing up, you kneel by the small table, crush juniper berries, and set them smoking on a shard of coal. The scent is sharp, cleansing. You breathe deeply, through nose, not beak, for what may be the last time without filter. You mutter words from Psalm 91. Thou shalt not be afraid for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. Liar, you think, but you keep repeating until pulse steadies. Mask on, hat straight, staff in hand, you descend to the street. Dawn paints rooftops blush pink, a liar's sky. Somewhere a rooster tries to crow, voice thin. You walk toward the bakery, wondering if the master survived the night. You'll lance more buboes, scrawl more crosses, bargain with aldermen, comfort orphans, threaten gravediggers, and maybe, just maybe, scrape a grain of knowledge from the carnage. The oven door bangs open before the dawn chill is fully gone, and a wave of scorched rye rushes out to greet you. The baker didn't die in the night, but his right hand is bound in bloody linen and shakes like a snared hare. He's half mad with fever, still insisting on filling orders for what's left of the cathedral canons. You trade quick glances. He's contagious, no question, yet half the city swallows his loaves. You push past smoke, slice through panic, and seize the paddle yourself. For 10 charged minutes, you're not a doctor. You're just a sweating stranger saving bread from burning. Flames lick the peel, soot beads on your mask glass, and somewhere in the hissing roar, you hear the soft crack of another promise you can't keep, that you'd never touch communal food. The embers spit, but the loaves survive, and when you lug them to the counter, townsfolk actually cheer. In that applause hides a plea: keep the basics alive a little longer. You shuffle the baker onto a bench, elevate his hand, and pry off the wrap. A whitish ring encircles a crescent blade cut, self-inflicted while trimming dough. You know the infection's creeping, but he's not yet doomed. You cauterize with red-hot iron fetched from the coals, the smell of searing flesh folding into the bread scent until you almost gag. He bites down on a leather strap, eyes bulging. When it's done, you coat the wound in honey and powdered willow bark, poor man's antiseptic and pain draught, and instruct his daughter to keep the bakery shuttered 3 days. She nods, though tears drag flour tracks down her cheeks. Outside, you hand a loaf to the nearest orphan cluster.
Their squeals feel like sunlight in this unending dusk. Street after street yawns wider as families flee, doors hanging askew, pets picking at refuse. A woman hurls linens from an attic window, convinced burning bedding chases plague spirits away. Ash snowflakes drift onto your hat brim. You guide her back inside, promise to bless the rooms later, and mark her doorway with chalk, the silent code to city sweepers that valuables remain, so hold the looters at bay. A trumpet call slices the damp air. You follow the notes to the militia green, where soldiers in dented helms form ragged ranks. Their captain wants you to certify men as fit to guard before they post at quarantined roads. Fit is relative. Half cough behind beards, 2 sport visible swellings, 1 vomits discreetly behind a tree. Refuse them, and the city wall crumbles. Approve them, and you sign citizens' death warrants. You compromise, again, ordering masks of linen dipped in brandy and a rotation schedule so no man stands longer than a candle length. The captain scoffs at your fussing, but he's already burying yesterday's centuries, so he relents. Midday sun emerges, thin, watery, as you climb the hill to St. Brigitte's leper house, now draft rebranded a plague annex. The sisters here have no formal vows, only iron nerves. They greet you brandishing rosemary torches. Inside, pallets fill the refectory. Patients moan in dreamless half-sleep. One boy, maybe 12, begs for water. You drip peppermint infusion onto cracked lips, watch him swallow with effort. His pulse races like a trapped bird. You want to promise recovery, but truth is a luxury no one can afford. Instead, you tell him stories of northern traders who sail beyond ice, of glass windows that shimmer like captured rainbows in palaces you've never seen. His breathing eases. Whether from wonder or exhaustion, you can't tell. The sisters have questions. Is it true cats carry the miasma? You shake your head. They exhale relief. The kitchen boasts 2 rat-killing tabbies. Should we bleed the fevered? You grimace. Old remedies die hard. You hand them your last 2 packets of ground sage and instructions for vinegar compresses. Before leaving, you bar the main doors with fresh tar crosses, both warning and ward. Outside the annex, Brother Matthias meets you again, cloak flapping like ink-black wings. He's breathless, pages flittering from an unrolled chart. He's mapped outbreak clusters on a woodcut of the city and overlaid lunar phases. Patterns emerge, he swears. Spikes follow the waxing gibbous. You admire his faith in geometry while you wade through chaos. But you copy his chart into your ledger all the same. Every clue matters, even the desperate ones. Afternoon heat lifts vapor from every dung heap. Your beak wax softens, drips resin along the edge. You head for the riverbank where washerwomen thrash linens against stones, soap bubbles merging with floating carcasses of dogs and, God help you, a child. You order immediate cessation. No washing, no drinking from this current. They glare. Water is life. So you teach them to boil it. Demonstrate using your own tin cup over a brazier. Some nod. Others mutter that boiling drives away guardian spirits. Belief is the second epidemic, but you can treat only one at a time. Bright banners catch your eye upriver. A barge with crimson sails, the physician general from the capital, rumor says. He disembarks amid a retinue wearing starched ruffs and scented gloves, distributing pamphlets listing symptoms and recommended leeches per body weight. He spots you, dirty bird mask, mud-caked boots, and summons you with a lace handkerchief wave. His questions are polished as his silver cane. Mortality percentages, vector theories, clergy morale. When you mention flea-ridden rats, he laughs. Fleas, preposterous, the stars rule illness. You stifle anger, arguing robs time. He appoints himself chief of quarantine, demands your records, promises miracle electuaries. As he strides away, you tuck duplicates of your ledgers into your satchel. If bureaucracy buries them, knowledge dies.
Late afternoon shadows stretch like talons over alleyways. You visit your one refuge, the old sculptor's courtyard, where weather-worn gargoyles sit half-finished. He still chisels despite grief-stoop in his back. Since losing his son, he shapes stone to muzzle tears. He's carved a tiny plague doctor figurine, beak and all. He presses it into your glove, says nothing. You nod, suddenly aware your throat stings with withheld sobs.
Just outside, the air erupts with a shriek. Riot at the grain depot. Starving laborers attempt to seize sacks reserved for nobility. Guards swing clubs. Desperation answers with rocks. You plunge into the fray, staff raised as if Moses could part human seas. It works only because both sides fear contagion via contact with your robes. You negotiate. Distribute half today, half tomorrow if the crowd queues orderly. No one believes you can enforce it, but the crowd disperses, clutching handfuls of rye like stolen treasure.
Dusk slides down like a guillotine. You return to the pest house to relieve the night attendant, whose red-rimmed eyes plead for escape. You send him home, vowing to manage alone. Inside, lamplight flickers over rows of forms. You change dressings, coax sips of broth, write death times. At midnight, rain begins anew, drumming the roof, a lullaby for the doomed. You fight eyelids but lose, head nodding between charts. You wake to a ragged cough, your own, echoing through rafters. You freeze, hand to throat. Just dryness, you reassure, but doubt sets hooks. You flush fear with a gulp of aquavitae, then stumble outside for air. The storm has cleaned the sky. Stars shine like pinholes in black velvet. You spot Saturn near the moon, remember Matthias's theory, and feel cosmic gears grinding. Toward the gate, you hear someone sobbing, the corpse cart collector slumped by his wagon, shirt front dark with blood. He supported the dying beggar's head earlier. That was enough. You press fingers to his neck, alive but pulses irregular. You haul him into a stable, lay him on hay, and lance his bubo before it bursts. Pus spurts, stinging your glove. You pack it with garlic wine-soaked cloth, pray infection spared his lungs. He squeezes your forearm, whispers, "Tell my boy I tried." You memorize his son's name, Ansel, to deliver if you reach sunrise. Back in your room, candle flame trembles like a nervous heartbeat. You strip, scrub hands until skin peels, then inhale steam from juniper again. The gargoyle figurine perches on the windowsill, watching. You talk to it. Stone can't get sick. Lucky. Outside, bells toll 2, 3, then silence. And in that hush you sense the city itself breathing, slow, labored, but persistent. You pen another log entry. Day 14. Plague accelerates. Breadline riots. Outside physician ignorant. Morale brittle yet unbroken. Ink blots smear as your vision blurs. For a moment you imagine dropping quill, walking into the night, never returning. But then you recall the midwife, the baker's daughter, the doll girl's mother, the man carving hope from marble. Your feet stay. Before collapsing onto straw, you open the shutters. The eastern horizon blushes faint rose. A new day will demand new compromises, new courage, new lies dressed as comfort. You vow to invent better lies, lies that buy time until truth catches up. Rainwater still clings to every gutter like strings of glass when the cathedral bell rings prime. And the city stirs with that peculiar mixture of dread and obligation that only plague time can brew. You tighten the leather straps of your mask one notch deeper. Last night's steam warped them, and step straight out of the stables where you napped upright against a wall. The horse whose stall you borrowed snorts approval. Even beasts know sleep is a scarce commodity and should be shared when possible. First order, the Southeast Ward. Rumor says a pilgrim barge docked before dawn, smuggling 2 relics and at least 8 coughing souls. You arrive to find a makeshift checkpoint, overturned market carts, rope barricades, a sign hastily painted with tar, "Keep faith, keep out." The militiamen from yesterday eye you warily, but let you pass after you inspect their linen masks for dryness. One tries to joke about hazard pay. His laugh turns to a hacking wheeze. You record the sound in memory, a canary note signaling deeper collapse. Inside the ward, alleyways curl like labyrinth passages, each lined by 2-story half-timbers now warped by incessant damp. Smells overlap. Oak smoke, boiled cabbage, latrine runoff, until plague musk forces all lesser fragrances into submission. Children, too light for fear's full weight, chase a hoop that glows wet in the morning light. You warn them to keep away from pools of standing water. They roll eyes. Adults worry too much about invisible things. The pilgrim barge sits moored between warehouses, its deck draped in icons of saints who supposedly safeguard travelers. One plank creaks as you board, revealing 2 barrels of dried figs and a crumpled body wedged between them. Sailors insist the man died in his sleep from seasickness. You lift the tarpaulin. Bubo, the size of a small apple, splits the skin at his neck. Seasick, indeed. You order the captain to keep the crew isolated on board for a full week. He balks. You show him the dead man swelling again, suggest he decide whether profit outweighs burial duties for his entire crew. He agrees and even gives you the figs, which you earmark for the sisters. It may be their only fresh fruit this month. As sailors scrub deckboards with salt and vinegar under your supervision, you spot a wooden reliquary on a crate. Carved angels guard a cracked lid. Inside, 2 finger bones wrapped in silk, labeled Saint Apollonia, patroness of plagues.
Likely carved from goat leg, but faith can't bear scrutiny this morning. You bless the box anyway, quick Latin mutter, then seal it with wax and leave it on the dock post. People need symbols, even forged ones. You just pray this one won't also carry fleas. Next stop, magistrates' chambers. The city fathers demand a casualty census by sundown, so scribes scurry around oak desks, stacking parchment like siege bricks. They assign you a quill as if numbers alone save lives. You grind out figures. 32 new cases, 11 dead overnight, 1 baker burnt but stable, while the counselors argue about reopening the weekly fair. You remind them disease spreads faster than coin. They ask if fear is worse than famine. No easy answers, so you propose staggered stall spacing and patrols to douse anyone spitting in public. They nod, half relieved, half terrified. They wanted a reason, any reason, to claim doctor's orders. Paperwork finished, you slip behind the council hall into an herb garden tended by the old apothecary, Mistress Cecily. She lost her husband to scurvy years back, but grief fertilized her beds. Sage, rue, marigold blaze against the gray sky. She greets you with a sniff. You smell like burnt bread and human worry. You barter 2 plague charts for a pouch of dried lavender and a vial of distilled rosewater. The latter not a cure, but a kindness for patients too weak to smell anything but their own decay. Before leaving, you ask if she'll concoct camphor sachets for the sentries. She'll try, but camphor shipments stopped weeks ago. You promise to source resin from the Carpenters Guild. Wood shavings steeped in oil can mimic the scent. Noon sun barely registers behind woolen clouds as you trudge to the cathedral square. Stonemasons were supposed to finish a memorial for the city's first plague victims, but chisels lie silent. Instead, you find masons stacking coffins, pine boards hastily nailed, no handles. Father Aurelius stands among them, vestments tucked, hammer in hand. He sees you and confesses, supply of grave candles dried up. He's carving crosses to nail on lids so souls won't wander. You admire his calloused fingers, remind him souls travel lighter than pine when hope is strapped to them. You split the last of your juniper incense sticks with him. Smoke and prayer may calm mourners during tonight's mass burial. A piercing cry interrupts. 2 acolytes drag a thrashing girl toward the cathedral steps. Her limbs twitch uncontrollably, eyes rolled white. Onlookers cross themselves, whisper, "Possessed." You kneel, loosen her collar, note no fever but a strong smell of ergot rye. Convulsions from tainted bread, not demons. You command someone fetch milk and honey while you massage her temples. She bites her tongue, blood wells. You gently wedge a folded cloth between her teeth, ride out the seizure. When it ends, you instruct her mother, thin woman with fear-stretched eyes, to discard all remaining black rye flour. She nods, gratitude pooling in exhausted sobs. You barely stand when a messenger boy arrives, panting. The sculptor's courtyard is ablaze. You sprint, mask bouncing, across cobbles, past mule carts, through smoke that coils like angry snakes. Flames lick oiled cedar boards, sparks shower stone gargoyles. The sculptor, cloak aflame, beats at it with bare hands. Neighbors bucket chains water up from wells. You whip off your cloak, smother fire on his sleeve, drag him clear. His beard singed, he gasps, "Furnace upset, coal dust flash!" Burn blisters bubble across his forearms.
You dunk rags in rain barrel, wrap his wounds while others douse the shed. Inside, half-finished gargoyles now charred, hope smolders with them. Yet, amid wreckage, you find the tiny plague doctor carving intact. You pocket it. Some magic endures combustion.
Evening presses in sooner these days. A crimson horizon bleeds into low fog, and everyone moves faster, as if chased by darkness. You follow lamplighters igniting torches along Merchants' Row. Each flame seems fragile as moth wings. You head toward your lodging house, but detour when you see a man collapse by a fountain. His skin ash gray, pulse thin. You suspect internal bleeding, late-stage plague, or something worse. When you tilt his head, a ribbon of black bile trails from his mouth. You've seen that shade only once. Arsenic poisoning, perhaps? You check pockets, apothecary receipts, a pawn ticket, a crumpled love letter. No answers. You mark his forehead with Cole X, instruct bystanders to carry him to St. Brigitte's for observation, and to search his dwelling for others ill. They obey, hushed by the swiftness of his decline.
At St. Brigitte's Annex, the sisters navigate around bodies in various states of stillness. You join them in night rounds, your lavender and rosewater bringing brief smiles. The boy from yesterday still lives, clutching a wooden toy boat a volunteer carved. He asks if the sea is safe from plague. You spin a story of ocean winds cleansing sickness, promise someday he'll sail. Sister Agnes raises an eyebrow. You traffic hope recklessly, but she doesn't stop you.
You step outside for air again. Clouds part. A near full moon steers silver ship lanes across rooftops. You imagine the boy's boat riding them, free. Your brief reverie breaks when Brother Matthias hustles up, brandishing a new chart annotated with fever intensity versus chimney height. You want to laugh, but he's earnest. Instead, you suggest he overlay rat sightings for correlation. He beams at being taken seriously. On the way back to your lodging, you encounter the outside physician general's entourage. Their scented gloves now soiled, their faces drawn. One assistant confides the physician has fallen ill, nostrils bleed intermittently. He requests you attend. You sigh. The man mocked you not 12 hours ago, but professional oaths do not honor grudges. At his quarters, you find him trembling, reciting star positions between groans. You examine submandibular swelling, febrile skin. Plague does not respect intellect nor status. You suggest he remain isolated, but he orders more astrologers. You leave him laudanum for pain, knowing laudanum cannot seduce death twice. Back at your attic, you catalog the day's contradictions. Saved bread, lost gargoyles, rival doctor ill, riot diffused, girl rescued from false possession, sculptor burned yet breathing. You also note your own cough tally. Still only at 3 per hour. Acceptable, you joke to yourself. You chew dried figs for strength, then set quill to parchment, drafting a tract for tomorrow's fair. Boil water before use, a public appeal. You'll nail copies to market stalls and pay urchins a copper each to shout the headline. Just as you extinguish lamp, pounding at the door. The corpse cart collector's son, Ansel, dirt-streaked, breathless, stammers that his father vomits blood. You grab satchel, follow him through streets ghostly silent but for your boot falls. At their hovel you find the collector curled on mats, face blue-tinged.
The wound you treated festers, gangrene creeps. You realize lancing wasn't enough. You slice deeper, flush with wine, pack with moldy bread, the only primitive penicillin you've got. You speak softly. Hold on for your boy. He squeezes your wrist weakly. Ansel watches, knuckles white, around a tin cup. You instruct him on wound care, promise to return at dawn. He nods hard. His brittle courage cracks your chest. Near dawn, you return to streets washed in cold gray. Fog lifts like a theater curtain, revealing damage lines you hadn't noticed. More boarded windows, more chalk marks, but also candles flickering in doorways, a silent collective prayer. You pass a window and glimpse your reflection, beak mask skewed, feathers of ash in your hair, eyes red. You look like the monster parents warn children about. Yet, for this city, you are also a candle. Flickering, yes, but lit. Moonlight hangs like a frayed banner above the city walls when your boots hit the cobbles once more, and you swear every stone remembers the weight of yesterday's footsteps. The air is colder tonight, sharper too, as though invisible blades skim it clean. You taste iron on the wind, a sure sign the western slaughterhouses have started burning off offal again to keep the rats away. Another layer of smoke, another maskful of stench to trap inside the beak. You begin where the bell towers end, the rag picker's quarter. By day, it's a riot of dyed scraps and gossiping seamstresses. By night, it's a warren slick with tallow drippings from smuggled candles. Lanterns shake in every hand you pass, but their light doesn't so much pierce the darkness as negotiate with it. You navigate by sound, looms clacking even after sunset, laughter that's trying too hard, the sudden hush when someone spots the silhouette of your plague garment. Familiar, necessary. A weaver's assistant greets you with a thin smile and a thinner arm. He's lost weight since your last rounds. His cough is shallow but persistent. You listen to his chest, counting the beats between rattles, then prescribe a steam of thyme and mustard seed. He thanks you with 2 skeins of indigo thread, a currency more valuable than copper among the fabric folk. You tuck them away. Perhaps Sister Agnes can barter them for fresh linens. Farther in, a tall warehouse quivers under the rhythms of a clandestine loom, the guild's answer to shortages. Inside, women work barefoot so their clogs don't echo, shuttles flying like captured birds. One collapses as you step through the door. Workers scatter, afraid your presence means death warrants. You kneel, open your satchel, check her breath. Faint, acrid. Examination reveals a bruise not from plague, but from the beam that swung loose overhead. A blessing in disguise, painful but survivable. You splint her arm with spare heddles, teach another worker how to bind ribs, then face the floor master with ultimatum. Reinforce rafters or you'll seal the place. He bobs his head, promising thicker ropes by dawn. Whether fear of plague or of you moves him, you can't tell, and maybe it doesn't matter. Outside, a boy sells roasted chestnuts from a brazier hammered out of an old shield. Business is slow, so he volunteers to guide you to the tanner's lane in exchange for a story. You oblige, telling him how the southern kingdom's once believed plague was carried by invisible arrows fired from the sky. They'd whistle upward to confuse the winds.
He grins, pockets 3 chestnuts as tribute to whichever saint deflects arrows in this town. Tanner's Lane reeks of urine and death at the best of times. Tonight it carries an extra note, bitter almond. You quicken pace, force open the tannery doors. Inside, ammonia haze clouds the air. 2 workers sit dazed beside vats. One is unconscious, lips dark as mulberries, pupils pinpricked. They've mixed apricot pits into soaking liquor, believing rumor that the scent drives away pestilential vapors. Instead, they've brewed cyanide. You haul both men to the courtyard, drench them with water, encourage vomiting. One survives, the other slips away mid-spasm. You mark the corpse, then smash every jar of the lethal concoction. Splinters and bitter liquid splash across the cobbles, sizzling against lime residue. In the lamplight, it looks almost holy, a grim baptism. You leave instructions with the overseer. No more folk remedies without your approval. He mutters something about guild autonomy until you mention the magistrate's prison rates. That shuts him up. Threats of civic fines move faster than fleas here. Your route bends toward the river next, following oily water that gleams like black marble. On the northern bank, barbers converted their shop into a triage shelter. Makes sense, blades close to veins. They wave you in. One young barber shows you a new lancet he's fashioned from a broken mirror. Edges too serrated, you refine it against a whetstone while lecturing about sterilizing with flame, not just wine. Meanwhile, his apprentice ferries you to a patient, a stonemason whose leg shattered falling from scaffold days ago. The barber said it, but now foul odor seeps through bindings. You unwrap splints, bone ends misaligned, pus thick as beeswax. No time for courtesy. You call for hot water, vinegar, brandy. The barber grips the patient's shoulders. You re-break the limb with a swift pull, sparks of pain lighting the mason's scream. You align fragments, pack with honey-soaked cloth, resplint using oaken slats. His face slack with shock. Still, he lives. Teach them to watch for green discharge. Send them scurrying for willow bark tea. Outside the shop, you spy lamplighters again, but tonight they're followed by 2 robed flagellants. Barebacks striped crimson, they chant psalms slightly off-key, whipping themselves to beg divine mercy. Crowds trail them like debris behind a ship. You cut through the throng, warning that shared scourges spread real blood-borne sickness. They hiss that your mask offends God's sight. You retort that God perhaps invented beaks before whips. They promise prayer for your soul. You promise to bury theirs if infection takes them. An impasse. Past midnight, you arrive at the debtor's prison, a former granary now home to men whose only crime was bad harvest or worse friends. Plague sneaked in last week through a guard's nephew. They cage the ill on upper lofts, away from honest debtors. You climb the ladder, lantern swinging. 13 prisoners press against wall slats, eyes feral. You test pulses, dispense your dwindling rosewater for sores. One inmate gifts you a poem scratched on birch bark, a thank you in verse for the smell of flowers. You bow. Literature outlives flesh, sometimes. On the descent, the guard inquires whether to burn the infected loft.
You bite your reply. Instead, instruct him to open extra vents for air, supply boiled water, and rotate watchmen. He scoffs. Costly. You hand him the birch bark poem, urge him to read aloud to the magistrate before deciding the cost. Could words save lives? Stranger things occur daily.
Near the university, a cloaked figure steps from shadow. Professor Lucian, the anatomist who once dissected plague victims in secret. He whispers his latest finding. Infected lung tissue appears blackened around airways like burnt parchment. He seeks your help to test herbal fumigants on cadavers tonight. You decline. You have living bodies to manage, but encourage him to document thoroughly. He nods, scribbles notes even as he speaks. Academia doesn't sleep, only dreams standing up.
Fatigue claws at your eyelids, but dawn is still a rumor. You press on to the Red Manor, a brothel repurposed as quarantine for expectant mothers. Midwives insisted no male doctors, but plague changes rules. Inside, walls glow crimson from draped velvets, yet hush blankets hallways. A laboring woman grips your glove as you enter. Fever beads her brow, but contractions stalled. You brew pennyroyal tea to stimulate womb, then coach breathing while midwives massage her back. Hours stretch elastic. Finally, a wail. Life insists on arriving during death's reign. The child emerges slick and loud. The mother's fever breaks minutes later. Midwives cheer softly, tears mixing with sweat. You instruct them to wash the infant with wine and wrap him in boiled linen. Maybe he'll never remember the world smelled of rot his first night. You exit into bluish pre-dawn, legs wooden, heart oddly light. The sky has cracked open, spilling a seam of powdery stars over rooftops. You allow yourself a breath. Then another messenger pelts down the lane. Brother Matthias again, waving parchment. He's mapped rat sightings against chimney density. Verdict: higher rodent clusters near bakeries. He begs field verification. You promise sunrise inspection if he returns home to sleep. He grins sheepishly. Even scholars need curfews.
Your final stop is the cemetery, where gravediggers have worked by torchlight. Rows of fresh mounds shine. Dew collects on makeshift wooden crosses. Father Aurelius offers you a cup of watered wine, his hands trembling. He confesses nightmares of digging his own grave each night. You trade him a fig. Tell him sometimes the mind rehearses fear to blunt its edge. He replies that edges stay sharp regardless. One learns to bleed with grace. Together you recite a prayer, not for the dead, but for the living who must keep counting. Before you depart, you plant the tiny wooden plague doctor figurine salvaged from the sculptor amid a cluster of graves, nose pointing east. A sentinel of sorts, carved hope embedded in soil. You whisper, "Guard them," and somehow the silent wood seems to nod. Dawn finally arrives, pale as unbaked dough. You trudge to the Carpenter Guild, trade indigo thread for camphor shavings as promised. When you hand the bundle to Mistress Cecily later, she presses a kiss to your gloved knuckles, eyes shining. Even masked, you blush. Back at your attic, you peel off leathers, hang them near smoke pot, rosemary and sage to purify. Your body hums with pulses not entirely your own, screams remembered, gratitude absorbed, terror deflected. You jot case notes until quill tip splinters. Somewhere below, church bells summon the healthy, fewer each day, to Mass. You mutter, let them sing loud enough to scare death back into its cave. Sunrise pretends to be merciful, spilling rose-gold light across herringbone roofs, but you already know the color will fade to ash long before the city's breath evens out. You've slept, if closing your eyes while cataloging symptoms counts as sleep, for perhaps the length of a single church hymn. The moment the distant bell tolls prime, you're lacing stiff leather again, sliding the mask's beak over bruised cheekbones, and stepping onto the narrow stair that smells of tar and sweat. Outside, gulls circle louder than usual. Either someone's dumped spoiled fish in the gutters, or the birds have learned to recognize your silhouette as the promise of unattended corpses. You try not to wonder which.
First stop is the Charnel Dock, because ships don't pause epidemics, they simply deliver new ones. A merchant cog from Valencia limped into harbor overnight after losing half its crew mid-voyage. Harbor Master Gervais begs your help before the city council orders the vessel torched. You board via slippery plank. Deck planks are streaked with candle wax from vigil prayers, now hardened into ghostly tears. 3 sailors still breathe, though barely. You test glands, examine tongues, note the blackening that creeps like spilled ink along their gums. They're past saving, but mercy isn't measured by survival alone. You mix poppy resin into watered brandy, tilt beaks aside, and share your own breath's rhythm so their last moments sink with something calmer than the sea.
On shore, dock workers cluster at safe distance, crossing themselves with pitch-stained hands. You address them through the beak, voice warped but firm, instructing a controlled burn of bedding, a lime wash of wood, quarantine for those who boarded. They protest. Wages vanish with time off. You counter with a simple equation: a week without pay or a lifetime without lungs. Silence follows, then slow nods. Your path veers inland toward the granaries. Rumors say grain sacks crawl with fleas thick enough to form a living carpet. Sisters from the convent meet you halfway, brandishing eucalyptus branches like swords. They've read somewhere that the scent drives vermin mad, enough madness to make them leap off hosts. You don't argue. Sometimes rituals help more than poultices. Together, you sweep through the warehouse, scattering the pungent leaves. Fleas flee, whether from scent or commotion, no matter. You order barrels of grain sealed with tar, a measure sure to anger bakers later. Let them bake fury into loaves. Better that than contagion. Mid-morning heat presses down, turning your waxed cloak into a portable kiln. You slip into the shade of the cathedral's half-built nave. Here, masons labor still, trusting stone arches to keep faith standing even as bodies fall. Foreman Theobald greets you with dirt-lined grin. He's proud no worker has taken sick. You inspect their hands, calloused but unspotted, pulses steady. You compliment rigorous hygiene. They scrub with lye before meals, avoid shared cups. He beams like a squire knighted. Small victories deserve parades, even if only inside a masked physician's skull.
But triumph sours quickly. A crash echoes from the bell tower scaffold. Rope snapped, pulley shattered. You sprint up spiral stairs slick with plaster dust. Halfway, you find the fallen apprentice, leg twisted, tibia spearing through flesh like a white dagger. Pain has rendered him silent, eyes wide and glassy. No plague here, just raw catastrophe. But agony knows no hierarchy. You unwrap splints, recall last night's mason, and realize supplies have dwindled. Improvisation again. 2 cedar rulers from a surveyor's kit become braces. Silk scarf donated by a passing noblewoman becomes binding. You realign bone with practiced yank. His scream ricochets off stone, startling pigeons into flight. Afterward, you gather the scattered workers, instruct them on safer pulley loads, demand doubled rope thickness. They comply. No one wishes to test your repertoire of threats. The apprentice, drifting into shock, thanks you through clenched teeth. You offer diluted wine, another improvised anesthetic, and whisper he'll dance again come spring. A lie? Perhaps, but hope is an acceptable counterfeit in triage. Afternoon summons you to the scholar's quarter. University fellows petition your expertise. Their prized anatomical manuscript, illuminated with gold leaf, reeks of mildew after being hidden in damp catacombs for protection. They fear spores carry pestilence. You thumb pages carefully. The smell is mere rot, not vector. Still, you prescribe airing under sun, light brushing with vinegar solution. One professor insists on compensation for emotional distress. You suggest he volunteer at the charnel dock to contextualize distress. Debate ends swiftly. Across the quad, you find Brother Matthias, sleepless cartographer again, constructing a massive wall map of contagion points. Colored pins bloom like infected pustules across parchment. He invites your opinion. Do patterns predict next outbreak pocket? You study clusters, noting their drift along water channels. An idea surfaces. Drainage grates might harbor nests of flea-ridden rats. You propose boiling water flushes nightly. He scribbles notes, eyes alight, as if you've handed him divine cipher. Hunger gnaws finally, but food proves elusive. Lips inside beak seldom taste more than fatigue. You settle for dried figs, washed down with sour cider strained through linen. Not feast, yet it reminds you of a childhood orchard far away, before masks, before death smelled familiar. The sun tilts west when a runner from the Guildhall finds you. The city council has confiscated a vacant manor to use as central hospice. They require immediate inspection before admitting patients. You arrive to find cobwebbed chandeliers, cracked marble floors, tapestries moth-chewed but grand still. Volunteers scrub with lye, but ventilation remains poor. You order windows smashed to invite air. A merchant protests destruction of property. You remind him the property belonged to a tax-evading duke, now buried 3 weeks. The merchant relents, even hands you his cane to break stained glass. Shards scatter like jeweled rain. Light floods halls for the first time in years. Night creeps back, bringing chill and rumors. Word spreads of a traveling charlatan hawking anti-plague relics outside the city gate. Vials of river water blessed upstream, feathers from biblical ravens, coins struck with the archangel's image.
Desperate citizens empty purses. You march with 2 constables to confront him. His wagon glitters with trinkets, candles, false saints' bones. Under questioning, he admits his feathers come from common geese, his coins from a local back-alley smith, his water straight from a muddy moat. The crowd murmurs, betrayal mixing with embarrassment. You confiscate goods, redistribute coins to buyers, and give the charlatan a choice. Assist the gravediggers for a month, or spend that month in stocks wearing a placard labeled Plague Profiteer. He chooses shovels over shame. Wise man. Heading home seems plausible, but a red flag tied to a doorframe halts you. Plague sign. Inside a family of 5. Only the eldest daughter, Isolde, remains lucid enough to speak. She's been nursing parents and younger siblings alone, stoking fire, fetching water, singing lullabies while her own fever simmers. Her voice cracks as she begs for something, anything, to ease her mother's breathing. You have 1 vial of distilled opium left, reserved for emergencies. You weigh protocols, then hand it over with precise dosage. Tears carve tracks on Isolde's cheeks. You linger, teaching her how to ventilate room when cough seizes her. Blood flecks her kerchief, ominous as storm clouds. You want to promise survival, but the lie sticks this time. Instead, you promise presence. She nods. Sometimes that's enough. Back on the street, musicians play lutes on a balcony, hoping melodies drown tolling bells. The tune is lively, almost sacrilegious in this context. But passers-by pause, smile, sway. You realize that song is as medicinal as any herb. You tip the musicians with an herb pouch, instruct them to brew thyme tea between sets, voice tonic. They laugh, salute with instruments. On the bridge spanning the river, a miller confronts a washerwoman over accusations her laundry pollutes water, breeding sickness. Voices escalate, fists ball. You intervene, reminding them plague doesn't discriminate. It multiplies through division. You broker compromise. Washerwoman agrees to boil linens further upstream. Miller offers flour at reduced price. Peace brokered, at least until next panic. Stars prick the sky now, yet tasks persist. The alchemist's tower beckons. Master Orfeo claims to distill invisible fire that could cleanse air. You climb corkscrew stairs, enter chamber thick with fumes. He demonstrates. A blue flame dances atop alcohol. Herbs sizzle, smoke sweet. He proposes portable sensors for homes. Idea holds merit. You caution him to test in stone rooms first, not timber huts. He accepts, brain already sprinting ahead. Back outside, frost forms on your mask's metal rim. You sense your own body nearing limit, but final summons arrives. The orphanage. A dozen children spiked fevers after caretaker fell ill. You find them nesting in attic under quilts stitched from mismatched scraps. Their eyes follow the beak, fear, curiosity. You kneel, remove gloves, show hands to prove human beneath disguise. You check pulses, tongues, note they're warm, but lesions absent. Possibly false alarm, seasonal egg. Still, you steep elderflower and yarrow, tell them stories of foxes outsmarting plague spirits. Laughter bubbles between coughs. Before leaving, you gift them the wooden plague doctor figurine's twin, carved last winter by same sculptor. Set it on windowsill as guardian. They christen it Sir Beakalot and vow to feed him crumbs. The long walk home, hushed, except your boots and distant dirge. You tally day's endeavors, sailors eased into death, apprentice's leg saved, hospice prepped, fraud unmasked, family comforted, orphans calmed. Victories fragile, but in plague arithmetic, every plus sign matters. At your attic desk, candle stub flickers. You log cases, annotate map, then write a single note to yourself. Tomorrow, investigate drainage grates. You seal it with wax like a vow. Finally, you unmask, inhaling bare air. It smells of smoke, citrus, and something like resilience.
Moonlight spills over the city like diluted milk, bleaching rooftops a pallid gray and turning every puddle into a trembling mirror. You're already on your feet, boots tied, mask dangling from your fingers, when the watchman's horn blares 3 urgent notes, the code for something dreadful and new. The horn keeps repeating, as if afraid silence might let the horror grow teeth. You press the beak to your face, feel the familiar clamp of leather straps, and step into a night that smells of damp slate and sleepless anxiety. The crisis waits on Candlemaker's Row, narrow and crooked, a place that usually reeks of tallow and gossip. Tonight it reeks of smoke. An entire tenement stands ablaze, flames licking across timber like starving serpents. The city guard forms a shaky bucket chain while residents sob behind a hastily erected cordon. Somewhere inside, 6 occupants lie quarantined. Too contagious to evacuate, too fragile to survive fire. You do the arithmetic in one aching heartbeat. Smoke inhalation will kill them faster than the plague, but neither option is mercy. You stride past the cordon, ignoring the sergeant's protests, and climb the exterior stair, cloak snapping in updrafts of heat. On the landing, the door handle glows red-orange. You wrap it in damp cloth, wrench it open, and face a corridor choked with smoke, dense enough to chew. The air rasps your throat, even through rose oil sachet filters in the beak. You crouch and crawl, memory reciting the room's positions from prior visits. Left side, first door, a widow named Eleanor. She lies on straw, delirious, humming children's lullabies. You soak your sleeve, press it to her mouth, lift her across your shoulders. She weighs less than the guilt you carry daily. Next room, twin brothers, scrawny Smith's apprentices. One tries to rise when he sees you, then crashes to the floor as a rafter groans overhead. You drag both by their wrists, heart hammering arrhythmic warnings. Ember flakes drift around you, settling like sinister snow. By the time you reach the stair, flames have swallowed half the banister. You kick open a shutter, haul your charges onto the balcony roof, and signal the guards below. They fetch ladders, blanket the sick in wet sheets, pass them down like fragile reliquaries. Last you lower Eleanor, who whispers thanks into the mask's hollow. You tell her to save breath for living. Back inside, 2 patients remain. Floorboards blister underfoot. In the north corner, you find Father Damasus, the street's reclusive priest, unconscious but pulse present. As you hoist him, beams shudder. The roof is minutes from collapse. The final occupant, a child you'd never met, curly-haired, maybe 5, lies in a cot humming softly to a rag doll.
She stares at the blazing rafters as though they're constellations. When you lift her, she clutches the doll to your chest, trusting utterly. That trust scares you more than flames.
The staircase now spits sparks like a forge. Your only exit is a shutter leading onto a laundry line strung to the neighboring house. Fire illuminates the gap, a dizzying 10-foot void over a courtyard littered with pottery shards. You knot the line around your waist, cradle the child, balance Damasus across your shoulders. You step into empty air, the rope sagging into a lethal smile. For 2 breaths, gravity negotiates rent in your bones. Then souls skid on the opposite sill, knees scream but hold. You're across.
Guards cheer as you emerge carrying survivors. They'd assumed the bird-masked physician was doomed. You ignore applause, issue orders, isolate the saved in the new hospice, administer willow bark for smoke coughs, apply cool cloths to blistered skin. A volunteer asks how you face the flames. You want to say, fear burned hotter than fire, so fire felt familiar. Instead, you shrug. The tenement collapses behind you with a howl like cathedral organs played by ghosts. Sparks drift upward, mixing with stars until you can't tell which burns and which simply is.
Dawn edges in. Birds emerge, confused by smoke, chirping off-key. You return to your attic to change linen filters and inventory dwindling remedies. Catgut sutures, 3 lengths left. Camphor, a walnut-sized lump. Opiate tincture, half vial. The ledger of deficits lengthens. You'll need supplies, but apothecaries are closed. Owners either dead, fled, or barricaded. So you make for the one place commerce still trundles, the clandestine night market under St. Gertrude's Bridge. Merchants here sell contraband luxuries, silk, saffron, and, lately, medicines relabeled as miracles. You barter with a spice dealer for dried gentian root. Swap your last silver ring for jars of honey to coat sore throats. Then corner a glassblower squatting beside crates of vials. He offers distilled spirits strong enough to scrub plague masks clean. In exchange, he wants exemption papers for his feverish wife. You can't forge documents, but you promise to examine her personally. He hesitates, peers into your beak's eye holes looking for deceit, then nods. Trade made. You pause by a fortune-teller's canvas stall. A tiny woman wrapped in patchwork shawls. She invites you to sit, read your future in pools of ink. You decline. You already know your future. It smells like disinfectant and ends alone. She touches your gloved hand anyway, mutters a blessing in a language you don't recognize. The gesture disarms you more than predictions would have. By mid-morning, hospice corridors bustle like anthills. Volunteers in makeshift masks carry chamber pots, strip soiled linens, recite prayers that blend with coughs into a single droning litany. You distribute your new medicines, teach a young merchant's widow how to mix gentian with honey for fever tea. She's terrified yet determined, hands steady as she crushes roots with pestle. In isolation ward, you visit the sailors rescued days ago. 2 have slipped beyond. You close their eyes, draw curtains. The 3rd, Geordie, has rallied. He asks if he may write a letter to a lover in Valencia. You fetch ink, steady his shaking hand.
He dictates while you move quill. Memories of moonlit decks. Promises to meet in next life where seas are calm. When finished, he presses parchment to his chest, packages it in hope. Another volunteer calls you to courtyard. Isolde, the girl who nursed her family, has arrived with her mother's body on a handcart, wrapped in linen. Tears engrave her cheeks, but fever no longer burns. She says the opium eased her mother's final hours. Then she offers to join laundry duty, to pay forward the kindness. You consent, though warn her grief will ambush when soap bubbles pop. She smiles wanly, shoulders squared as if wearing invisible armor. Afternoon brings the council's messenger. Plague has breached the western wall. A refugee camp shelters hundreds outside the gate, now choking on sickness. You and a contingent of barber surgeons ride out, cart laden with vinegar barrels, bandages, water skins. As you near the camp, stench precedes sights. Rot, sweat, despair. Tents sag like wilted petals. Children watch wide-eyed as you dismount. Your mask must seem both monster and miracle. Triage begins. You set up under a poplar, instruct barbers to lance buboes with heated daggers, cauterize to prevent seepage. You design wards, one for the convalescent, another for those crossing the threshold. It's impossible work, hands outnumbered by horror, but order inches forth. A woman collapses. Wailing her husband still breathes, though skin marbles dark. You kneel, count threadbare breaths, admit truth gently. She kisses his brow, allows tears exactly 2 heartbeats, then helps you lift him to the silent tent. Courage is contagious too. Toward dusk, a brawl erupts over bread ration. You break it by standing between fighters, staff held like a shepherd's crook. You remind them famine can't be punched, only rationed. They drop fists, pick up dignity. Before leaving, you mark each tent with chalk symbols. Rising sun for hopeful, hourglass for watch, candle stub for comfort care. You promise to return tomorrow. They nod, believing the bird-faced stranger more than their own leaders now. Night again. You climb the city's highest parapet for a momentary vantage. Below, lanterns flicker along streets, forming constellations of their own. Humanity's stubborn attempt to rival the heavens. You wonder how many souls those lamps honor. You wonder if the stars envy such devotion. Footsteps crunch behind you. Brother Matthias, the cartographer. He unfurls a fresh map. Infection clusters shrinking near the granaries since your flea flush initiative. He grins, eyes blazing with tentative triumph. You allow yourself a breath of pride, then circle new hotspots. Candlemakers Row after the fire, refugee camp, drainage grates still unchecked. Tomorrow's itinerary writes itself. Matthias says he's naming his next son, should he ever have time for a family, after you. You laugh, a dry sound you scarcely recognize, and tell him children deserve names less haunted. Descending the parapet, you spot the charlatan gravedigger, shovel slung over shoulder. Sweat and soil streak his once silken sleeves. He approaches, head low, but when he raises it, something like humility glimmers. He returns one of the archangel coins, says it lay on a corpse's chest, and he thought it belonged in your keeping. You accept, polish grime away, pocket as reminder that redemption sometimes sprouts in plague pits.
Hours blur. You find yourself back at the orphanage, summoned by urgent knock. The children's caretaker, a septuagenarian who wielded ladles like scimitars, has succumbed. Panic whispers in every corner. You gather the dozen orphans by hearth, swap mask for naked face so they see real eyes. You teach them a chant. Inhale hope, exhale fear. Inhale courage, exhale tears. They recite, voices trembling into harmony. Then you appoint eldest girl captain of cleaning, another child leader of bedtime stories. You leave them with a clay jar of honey. Instruct 2 spoonfuls per cough. They ask if you'll return tomorrow. Yes, you promise. Promises are the one currency plague cannot devalue.
Close to midnight, city bell tolls again, one solemn knell this time. It marks curfew, but also the final breath of the archbishop, rumor says. His palace is barricaded by guards who fear contamination. They refuse entry even to you. Yet a dying man deserves presence. You barter. You will examine each guard for symptoms in exchange for passage. They agree, anxiety outweighing protocol. Inside, the archbishop lies beneath tapestries depicting saints who seem to look away. He confesses regret, wealth hoarded, fears silenced, poor neglected. You listen, hold his frail hand through gloves, assure forgiveness may sprout even moments before dusk. He asks if the city will survive. You tell him survival is stitched from small hands washing with lye, from sisters wielding eucalyptus, from a charlatan digging graves. He smiles, expires quietly. You close his lids, cross his hands with the archangel coin. Empires rise on symbols, so can solace.
Back on streets glistening with frost, exhaustion wraps you like leaden quilt. Yet one last duty calls. You promised the glassblower. You navigate alley labyrinth until a single window glows aqua. Inside, the wife coughs dryly, eyes sunken. You examine her. Fever moderate, spots mild, early stage. You supply gentian honey, instruct hydration, elevate pillows. She thanks you, voice paper thin. The glassblower presses a new creation into your palm. A tiny vial shaped like your mask, blown from violet glass. Perhaps a token, perhaps a talisman. You tuck it near your heart.
Finally, attic again. Candle stub gone. You light lantern with trembling match. You strip mask. See your reflection in cracked mirror. Cheeks hollow, eyes rimmed red. Soot smears across brow like war paint. You can barely remember the face beneath, but you know the city does. That or the legend they've built on your silhouette.
You open ledger for final entry. Hand shakes, so you anchor wrist. You chronicle the fire rescue, refugee triage, new hospice metrics. Then you write the sentence you've avoided for weeks. Signs of plateau visible. The plague may be bending, not broken, but a bend is beginning.
On separate parchment, you draft recommendations for post-plague reforms, waste disposal, water filtration, public health offices. You know council may ignore you, but ink can outlive indifference.
Quill drops. Window shows first blush of dawn, pink, unsullied, almost audacious. You step onto balcony, inhale air that tastes of smoke and possibility. Church bells ring matins slowly, as if daring the day to be gentler. You tilt your face upward. Let raw light wash over unmasked skin. For once, you permit yourself a thought untainted by duty. Maybe, just maybe, tomorrow's horn will not sound. Listener, if this final march through night kept you perched on the scaffold of empathy instead of plummeting into sleep, gently tap that like button. Think of it as laying a fresh brick in the wall against forgetting. Drop your thoughts below. Which act of courage, big or quiet, struck hardest? Would you cross a burning laundry line or teach orphans to chant away fear? And if you've traveled all 7 restless nights with me, smash that subscribe bell so future tales find you even in the darkest hours. Share this saga with a friend who needs reminding that hope survives on the breath between one heartbeat and the next. Now rest. The beak is hung, the ledger closed. The city watches the sunrise without coughing for the first time in too long. May your own dreams be free of smoke, but rich with the sweet, stubborn music of survival. Good night, fellow traveler. History will wake again soon, and when it does, we'll be there, masks ready, stories waiting.